Timer from 1988, Shabbos Parshas Achri Mois Kedoshin. So it's interesting in this mimer, even though the title of the mimer is going to be from Parshas Achri, but then the Rebbe is going to connect it also with something in Parshas Kedoshin. It's a little bit not that common where the Rebbe will say a mimer and incorporate things from both Parshas, but this time he does. It says in Parshas Achrei about Yom Kippur. It says that Yom Kippur will be the day that Hashem will atone upon you, to purify you, and before Hashem, before Havaya Titharu. So before Havaya, in the simple meaning, is in the presence of Havaya. Here he speaks about not before Havaya as in the presence, but Chassidus always explains before Havaya means higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's explained in the L'Kutei Torah of our parsha, which we've many times the Rebbe constantly refers to it as a Chassidische parsha Shavuot, what's known as the Chassidische Seder, which Chassidim used to review, at least in passing, like you review Shnayim Mikra V'Echet Targum. לפne Havaya, what does it mean? Before Havaya means Pirusha, it means Lamaylam Shem Havaya. It means prior than Shem Havaya, higher than Shem Yud. Maybe Bazay brings concerning this. In Atshuvahu Lahashiv Nafshe Lakis, Limakar Chaitzvak, Mashahaisa, Kain Mesh Talshos, Virid Samadregis, Loyal Maza, Lis Labish, Beguf Magash. The Maimer Alter Rebbe explains that the idea of tshuva is to return the godly soul. Where are we returning it? In the simple meaning of tshuva, it means that the person did chas shalom something inappropriate, and therefore he needs to return it to its previously pristine state. But the way Chassidus explains is, regardless of what the person did or did not do, tshuva is returning it, the godly soul, to its source where it was hewn out from, the way the neshama was before it came down by the chain descent and the descent of levels until it finally reached this world to be enclosed in the physical body of a person down here below. Which means that tshuva is not limited to someone that did something wrong, chas v'sholom. Because just by the very fact, even the greatest tzaddik, the very fact that his neshama is in this world, in a physical body of a human being, that itself engenders a need for a return for the neshama to reconnect with its source the way it was, higher than the entire Seder Ishtalshus. What exactly was it like then? That time when the neshama was prior to going through all the different levels until it descended down here, it was part of its source and its root of all the worlds, the infinite light of Hashem. So what happened? What took place? After its descent and the going on from level to level, it changed from being to being. In other words, it completely became transformed by the process of Seder Ishtalshlos, and it descended to become enclosed in the body of a person down here in this world. In other words, the mashal Alter Rebbe brings in Perek Beis and Tanya that a child comes from the droplet that comes out of the brain. But then there are parts of the child that become toenails. Toenails have no comparison whatsoever to brain. Brain is the highest, most loftiest thing. The toenails are the lowest thing. So the process is that through being in a time of 9 months, going through the whole process of the development of the fetus until it's a born child, so it takes that droplet, which is originally sourced in the brain, and makes it down and causes it to change in its entire state to become something much more coarse, the toenail. The same thing Chassidus explains, the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Beis and Tanya, that when a neshama has to come down from the highest source and then come down to the body here in this world, it needs to go through all these different processes, all these different stages of development, all the different worlds until it's possible for this very lofty being that's higher than say the Shtalshus to become enclosed in the physical body down here. So therefore, since the neshama descended so low, how do we counter that and how do we deal with that? Therefore, there's a need to return it to its source the way it was, to elevate its soul to Hashem, that should be cleaving in the living God, that should become part of the infinite light of Hashem as it was initially before it descended into this world. So that is the idea of tshuva, that's the idea of return, and that's what as we're going to explain, it's returning to a level that's lifnei havaya, meaning that's beyond Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, as he's going to go on to explain in the Maimer. Why is this returning to a level that's higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei? So the Rebbe says in the second paragraph of this Maimer, V'yesh loymar. So now this is more or less what the Alter Rebbe said in this Maimer L'Kutei Torah. Now the Rebbe is going to explain what exactly is the is the meaning of this, and elaborating on the word over there in the Torah. Yes, Shloimar, we could say the much mevar ba Maimer the Torah not true. What he explains in the Maimer. Now, what's the content? What's the true idea of tshuva? Is to return the soul to its source. Is also to explain what it says over here about tshuva, that before and higher in Shem Havaya, you will become cleansed, you will become purified. In other words, in the original Maimer L'Kutei Torah, not necessarily does one idea follow the other. The Maimer talks about two separate ideas. One idea the Maimer talks about is Lifnei Havaya Tetaru, that the level of tshuva, the level of purity, not the level of tshuva, but the purity that the neshama reaches is from a level that's higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. And also the Alter Rebbe explains what is the idea of tshuva. Tshuva is about the neshama returning to its source. The Rebbe says these two ideas is interconnected. One explains and elaborates on the other. So he says in the third line of the second paragraph, what it says in the Maimer, the Shoyrish on Neshama B'Orin Baruch Hu, that the root of the Neshama is in the infinite light of Hashem. We could say that the intention in what the Alter Rebbe says in that Maimer L'Kutei Torah is referring, there's different levels the way we talk about the Orin Sof, and the intention, what the Alter Rebbe means in the Maimer, is the infinite light of Hashem, the way it's higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav. Since the idea of tshuva is to return the soul to its source and to its root, comes out the idea of tshuva is to return the soul beyond Shem Yud Kei Vav. That's why over here concerning tshuva it says before Havaya, higher than Havaya, because tshuva is the returning of the soul beyond Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Ein Sof, that from which the Tara comes from. The Lifnei Havaya is the Ein Sof that's higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the level where the neshama came from. That's the level of the tshuva. Here the Indian explanation this matter explain why we say that the root of the neshama is higher than the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. We say every morning in brachas, Shama that you placed in me is pure. Ata barasa, you created her, and then Ata Yitzarta, you formed her, and Ata nefachta, then you blew it into me. So obviously, barasa Yitzarta is going on the worlds of Bri Yitzira, and the nefachta is already talking about the way it's in Olam Haza Gashmi, and Tahirahi, the pure level of the neshama is higher than the neshama being created. So you're saying like this: Tahirahi is a state of the neshama. Barasa is what you're doing to the neshama. It doesn't say neshama you made it tahira. It says the neshama you placed in me is tahira. And then he says, oh, you made it created, you made it formed, you made it be blown in. So what do we see from this? The Hainu Shanasham Mitzad Atzmam, he bechinas Tahoirahi. That the Neshama on its own, without anything being done to it, that's a level of purity. Similar to what it says, Lifne Havaya Titaru. Higher than Shem Yudke Vavke comes the level of the Tahara of the Neshama. That's prior to and higher than you created her, like it says. Neshama Shnasata Bitahiri, Ata Baros. I know the Bechina Zuda Tahiri. This level of Tahiri is the level of godliness that's beyond the entire idea of the world coming into being, because that is the level of Atabaras. When we say you created her, that's talking about the level of the neshama that has to do with the creation of the world. And then we say that its essential state is Tahiri, higher than Atabaras. So that means that's the level that's beyond the entire world coming into being. Not only that, it's even higher than the godliness that brings the world into being. This itself, it's higher than the most highest level in godliness that brings the world into being. In godliness that brings the world into being. There are many levels. There's the level of godliness that's mamish connected to the world. The level of godliness that's totally connected and totally has an association with the world is the level of Hashem's name Elokim, like it says right away at the beginning of creation. In the beginning, the Elokim created the world. So in other words, the creation is thanks to Shem Elokim. So Shem Elokim has to do with the world and the creation. Then there's the level of godliness that's not totally connected with the world. The name Yudke Vavke is not as connected with the world as Shem Elokim. As we see, it wasn't used at the beginning of creation. The whole time it says in the beginning of creation, Bereshis bara Elokim, vayomer Elokim yior, vayomer Elokim tatli aretz deshe, vayomer Elokim yihi rakia. In the creation process, the only thing that was mentioned was Shem Elokim. But Shem Havaya also has to do. Even the name Havaya, which is not totally connected with the world, it still has some type of association. Why? So it's actually inherent in the word Havaya. One of the reasons that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, what the meaning of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is in the word of bringing the world into being. And also, we see Shem Havaya is associated with the creation, even though, like we said at the beginning of creation, it only says Vayomer Elokim Yior and so on. But at the end, when it sums up the entire creation, and it says at the end of the entire creation, at the time that the day that Havaya and Elokim made the Eretz and Shemayim. So what do we see from that pasuk? That the making of the heavens and the earth are associated not only with Shem Elokim, but it's also associated with Shem Havaya. So therefore, from this comes out. So the fact that the neshama's root is in a level of tahira that's higher than what it says, and you created her. Not only is the neshama itself higher than the world itself, but not only is it higher than the name Elokim that's directly connected with the creation of the world, it's higher even than the name Yudke Vavke. Because also the name Yudke Vavke is connected with the bringing into being of the world, and the neshama is higher even than anything that has to do with the creation, even Shem Yudke Vavke, which is a little bit removed from creation, but it still has a connection with creation. Next page. So it says in the second page of the Maimer, explain this matter more in depth. So he's going to explain the meaning or a deeper meaning or a deeper idea of Shem Yud Kei Vav. In Yadua, it's known, the Shem Havaya, who Shem Ha'etzem, it's the essential name of Hashem, the Shem HaMefurish, and the explicit name of Hashem, the Shem HaMiyuchad, that unique Shem of Hashem. So there's, in other words, it's not just one of the 7 names. It says there are 7 names that are not allowed to be erased. So the 7 names of Hashem, and Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei is one of them. No, Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Havaya, is completely above and beyond. It's not like a title, and it's not like a description, but it's something that's connected with Hashem's very essence. This means Hashem, this is the most highest of the names of Hashem. The fact that we're saying that the name Yud Kei Vav is associated with the idea of the world coming into being, it's only because it's a name, but it's not the essence. In other words, when you say Shem Ha'etzem, it's the name of the essence. That very title includes in it 2 components. You're saying it's a name, and you're saying it's a name of the essence. So on the one hand, you're connecting it with the essence, but on the other hand, it's only a name. And the fact that we're saying that Shem Havaya has to do with the creation, that is the component, or that is the idea of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's only a name for Hashem. It's not the actual essence. This will be understood, the depth of the matter. That we're saying the whole time, starting with the Maimon and Alter Rebbe. The root of Neshama is the level of Tahira that's higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hashayach L'Yishavas Ha'olam, that the level of Tahira that's connected and associated with the coming into being of the world. So that's higher than that. The Shoresh HaNeshama Hu. This means that the root of the Neshama is Ba'atzmusay Shalamayla Mikol Shemis V'Giluyim. It's the root of the Neshama is rooted in Hashem's very essence, that essence of Hashem that's beyond all names and all revelations. The idea of a name is there only to serve as a revelation, because a person needs to communicate with another person, and that other person needs to call him by name. So therefore, he needs to have a name. But the very essence of the person needs no name. When we say that a Yid's neshama is higher than even the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the name that is associated with the essence, that means it's associated so high with the essence beyond any types of revelations of Hashem, beyond any types of name. In now, this particular idea that we're talking about tshuva, shemashiv nefesh, l'sharsha, that we're returning the nefesh to its source, and to its root, to inyan shal aliyah l'neshama. That it's an idea of an ascent for the neshama. Usually, when we, in the simple meaning, when we talk about the word return, when we speak about something being returned, so then it's just getting back to where it was. You took something off the shelf, put it back where you took it from. Return it where you took it from. So seemingly, when we use the word return, that we are returning the neshama to its very high source, to this level of tahiri, this level that was higher than Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. So it seems to be that it's only returning, but nothing new happens. So the Rebbe says that's incorrect. That this return is really an ascent for the neshama, that the neshama is rising higher than it was even originally. So the Rebbe explains, when the point of the explanation of this is the fact that the neshama was rooted in Hashem's essence, even prior to it coming down here. So therefore, before it came down here, it was rooted in his essence, and now through tshuva, it's returning to the essence. So how can you say that there's any aliyah? So he explains how the way the neshama was rooted in Hashem's essence was way the neshama was above prior to descending down here below. The fact that we are returning the nefesh afterwards, the intention of this is also where the neshama finds itself down here below. The way a neshama is enclosed in the body, so this becomes that the spirit will return to the Eibishter that gave, which is a bigger chiddush and a greater power, that the neshama above should be connected with Hashem's essence. Okay, fine, it's a wonderful thing. But here, we're not talking about the neshama chas v'shalom leaving the body. We're talking about the neshama being in a physical body, being down here in this physical world, in the world, like Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, and while being down here, it's connected with Hashem's essence the way it was prior to descent. That's obviously a much more powerful thing. So he says, the idea behind this is this idea of the return of the nefesh to its root, occurs through the service of the neshama down here below, through the neshama making a home for the Eibishter down here below. Through that, it returns to its source. What is the content of the idea of making the world for a home for the Eibishter, which even down here below, it should shine Hashem's essence without any type of constriction. Why do we say that? Why is that inherent in the term Dira lo yisbarach? So he says, just like in a literal home for a person. What does it mean when a person is living in a literal home down here? The very essence of the person lives in the home. That's what it means when a person says they feel at home, they are at home. This means that the person feels completely comfortable. They do not have to present themselves in a certain way. You're a guest by someone, you're staying in someone's house, whatever. There are certain things you may not do because you're not in your comfort zone. There are certain things you may not say because you're not in your comfort zone. There are certain items in the household you may hold yourself back from touching because you're not in your own place. But when the person is in his own home, when he's living there, so his entire being is there, his entire essence is there. He's completely comfortable over there. Comfort means there's nothing constraining him, there's nothing limiting him. Oh, this I can't touch, this I can't say, this I can't do. There's nothing like that in his own home. So therefore, just like it is by a home by a person down here, so too it's in the fact that the world becomes a home for the Eibishter. Also down here below becomes revealed his essence without any constriction. Like it says in Mashiach's times, that your master will not anymore wrap himself in a garment. And like it's explained in Tanya, and at length in many places, he will not cover himself with you with a garment. So that's what the dir b'tachtonim means. Through this avoided the neshama draws down the Eibishter's essence down here below. So through this becomes an ascent also in the neshama, that we are returning it to its root in the Eibishter's essence. Because, in other words, it's quid pro quo. Since my avoida involves drawing down Hashem's essence, so the reward and the result for the avoida, schar mitzvah, is that the neshama returns to Hashem's essence. So I'm moving for this is understood. The fact that the neshama returns to its root. That's the way the neshama is enclosed in the body. When the neshama earned this, and we said, why did the neshama earn returning to Hashem's essence? Because it draws down Hashem's essence. But where did it draw down Hashem's essence? It drew down Hashem's essence down here below in this world. Therefore, its reward is in a similar way. How does it reconnect with Hashem's essence in this world? Therefore, also the reward that the neshama receives because of this service is also in a similar vein. That what's the similarity that it's down here in the body? That it should be that the spirit will return to the Eibishter that gave the neshama. Also, while the neshama is down here below, neshama beguf, a soul enclosed in the body. And that's the idea of the ascent that occurs in the neshama through its descent into the body. That even in this level, that the neshama finds himself down here below, enclosed in the body. It occurs by it that the spirit will return to the Eibishter that gave it. We just finished Rambam on Shabbos. The Rambam concluded with the words, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Eibishter like the waters fill the sea. And the Rebbe often brings down the idea that some people are scared what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. They'll become totally lost in godliness and so on. They will cease to be. But that's not what the Rebbe is saying over here. The Rebbe is saying the neshama will not return to above, but rather down here below in the body, the neshama will be returned and connected with Hashem's essence. And the Fabrengen, the Rebbe explains, what's the idea of Kamayim Liyom Mechasim? Kamayim Liyom Mechasim is like what lives in the sea, what lives in the water? Fish. Fish do not cease to be an existence because they live in the water. Just the opposite. They're totally identified with the water. And according to one opinion, they're not even considered a chatzitza if they somehow got stuck to a person's body and they're being toivel in the water. The fish is not a chatzitza because it's considered part of the water. Yet the fish live, the fish exists. And the fish exists so powerfully in the water that if they were to leave the water, they would cease to exist. So the same thing over here. At the very same time that the neshama is in a body and it's existing as a neshama in a body, as a person, while being in a person, it's connected with Hashem's essence, which is a much more powerful thing than the way it was connected with Hashem's essence before it came down into this world, before it came down into the body. Now the Rebbe is going to break this down even more. This ascent that the neshama acquires through Torah mitzvahs by being down here in the physical body has in it two components. And in this ascent, there are two aspects. One aspect of it is the fact that also while the neshama is down here below, it is returning to cleave in Hashem's essence, like we said before. The spirit will return to God that gave it. This is an indication of how powerful its bond is with Hashem's essence. Again, if the neshama is just connected with Hashem's essence when it's above, you don't know that the neshama really has this power of connection. It happens to be located above, so it's connected with Hashem's essence. But even while the neshama is down here, in the physical world, in the physical body, etc., and then it's still connected with Hashem's essence, you see, and it manifests the true powerful connection with Hashem. So that's one ascent and one quality, an advantage of having the neshama be connected to the Eibishter while being here in the body. Similar to what's explained in Tanya concerning a sin. Also, during the time of the sin, the neshama was faithful to Hashem. The omna v'itoi, that expression, ba'omna itoi, faithful with him, moira al toikef eskashrusa shenisha gamashas achet. This indicates the powerful bond that the neshama maintains even at the time of doing chas v'sholom something not good. So, in a similar vein, we can understand the power of the return of the neshama, despite it being in a physical body. This is also understood concerning the descent of neshama down below. The fact that also down here below becomes that the spirit will return to the Eibishter that gave it. It indicates the powerful bond of the neshama in Hashem's essence. So that's one advantage of the neshama returning to the Eibishter while it's here in the body, over the state that it was united with Hashem's essence before it descended down here. Now the Rebbe is going to point out another advantage. The second thing is this return of the neshama also affects the body, and its effect in the body. Like we mentioned before about the fish don't cease being fish because they're in the water. The body doesn't cease to be a body because it returned and became connected. The neshama became returned and became connected, and through it also the body to Hashem's essence. But rather also the way the body remains in its existence. The soul affects the body. The fact that he makes his body ancillary and auxiliary and his soul primary, like the Alter Rebbe speaks about in Perek Lamed Aleph and Perek Lamed Beis and Tanya. So the neshama's effect is that the body should know and feel that the water is the main thing, the lakus is the main thing. So again, that's an advantage that only happens when the neshama returns to Atzmus when it's here in the body. When the neshama was connected to Atzmus before it came down here into the body, it didn't have the advantage of having the body being connected with Elikus as well. But by the neshama descending into the body, since it doesn't negate the body, but it brings the body along on its trip, so the body also is now being elevated and subsumed in this elevation. So therefore, it's much greater than the way the neshama was prior to the descent here in the body that was connected to Atzmus. So as I said before, the Maimer not only starts what it says in Parshas Achrei, but he's also going to connect it with the second Torah portion this week of Parshas Kedosh. Yes, Lakashas Imam Avodah L'Kutei Torah Parshas Kedosh, and we can connect what's explained in L'Kutei Torah. And Parsha Kedosh, Chassidische Parsha, Das Seder Hashni Yiddish was the Chassidische Parsha of the second Seder of this week. Ala Posik, it speaks over there about the mitzvah of Arla. It speaks about Kisavoy Ola Oret, when you will come to Eretz Yisrael, when the Tatem Koletz Machel Gomer, and you will plant all fruit trees meant to be eaten, food from it. And the first 3 years will be Arla, one cannot eat from it anything, one cannot benefit from it. The 4th year, it's going to be Kaddish, it's going to be like Meiser Sheni, you need to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it only in a state of purity and holiness, or etc. And the 5th year, that's when it's going to be totally chulin. Then it's for your own use completely. You don't have to eat in Yerushalayim. You just serve it anywhere, anyway. Tamei, tar, it doesn't make a difference. So, seemingly, the Rebbe is going to say, and this idea doesn't make any sense. Usually, we go from lower to higher to higher. Seemingly, over here, we go from lower to higher, and then we go back low again. Rebbe asks, third line, this paragraph, the l'chura in a movement, seemingly it's not understood. The order of the matter, the chain order of descent is that we go from below to above. first 3 years, the tree will be like stopped up, clogged up. One cannot use it. It's prohibited foods. It's a level of turning away from bad. And in the fourth year, it's going to be kodesh, hilulim, lavai. It's going to be holy praises for Hashem. You eat it in Yerushalayim, which means it's a holy type of consumption. And the Rebbe says he likens it to another type of consumption that's considered holy. Dugmas achila, the Shabbos v'Yom Tov, similar to the eating on Shabbos and Yom Tov, b'chinas asei tov, doing good. So in other words, the first 3 years is like an avera, sumera, loisasa. The fourth year is like a mitzvah, like the mitzvah of eating on Shabbos and Yom Tov. There's a mitzvah to eat in Yerushalayim, asei tov, mitzvahs asa. Therefore, you're going from a loisasa to an asa, you're going from kdos to tatmeis, sumera to asei tov. What should be the next stop? Even higher. The ain't a movement, therefore it's not understood. Wine, the 5th year, is it permitted to eat the fruits of the tree everywhere? Even in a mundane manner, you don't have to eat it in Yerushalayim, etc. Even more so, it's not just so you can eat it like a mundane matter. The majority of a person's meals are weekday meals and not Shabbos and Yom Tov. If you add up all the days of the year, all the Shabbos, the 52 Shabbos that there throughout a year, plus how many Yom Tovim there are throughout the year, it's still going to be very, very little. It's somewhere in the area of, what is it, 75, 80 days of the entire year are Shabbos and Yom Tov that you could eat it in a holy manner or in a manner of a mitzvah. But the majority of the eating that's going to be in this 5th year are going to be weekday eating. So how can it be after going to Sur Merah and Asay Toiv, all of a sudden it's just mundane eating? It says, the idea behind this is the advantage and the quality at the higher level of the 5th year. It's a much higher type of service. That the 5th year has the power and capability to refine also physical matters. So it should be in all your ways you shall know him. The Yisayim even more so, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven. So the question is, why is Kol Masechel Shem Shemayim more than B'chol Rechecha Da'eyu? The Chiddush is, like we said before, even in the low thing, you have the holy. Even while they're being your action. You don't know him in your actions. It's your action. And at the time that I'm doing my actions, I have no awareness of Hashem. Still in all, why am I doing these actions? I have a purpose. They're for the sake of heaven. So in that way, we see that even a lower type of thing is being elevated to high. That's the advantage of the 5th year. Similar to what we said earlier, that the neshama descending into the body, making a dir b'tachtonim, not only does the neshama return to Hashem's essence, but also it affects also the body. Liyos gufay tafel, that his body should be ancillary and auxiliary, but nafshi ikar, and the soul is primary. The same thing. The 5th year is the same idea. While eating all our mundane foods and all our mundane fruits, it's still in a way of bringing Hashem into it. Now the Rebbe concludes with the bracha of Yiratzon should be the will of Hashem. Through speaking about these topics, let us actually come to fulfill the mitzvahs that are dependent on Eretz Yisrael in actuality. And where and when do we have that? That will be when Mashiach comes. That will be able to bring it to Yerushalayim, etc., etc. And we will fulfill it in the utmost perfect state. Because then when Mashiach comes, all of its inhabitants, meaning all the Shvatim, will be settled upon Eretz Yisrael. In the times of the second base of Migdash, it wasn't that all the inhabitants were there, because only the Shvatim of Yehuda and Binyamin that went into Gol's bubble returned to Eretz Yisrael. The 10 Shvatim that went into exile earlier, they hadn't returned even after the second base was rebuilt. We also need to examine if this rules and these ideas of the was applicable in the time of the first base of Migdash after the 10 Shvatim went into Golos. Enkin lost love as opposed to when Mashiach comes, as you call Yishmael Allah, then all of its inhabitants will be upon it. So therefore, all the mitzvahs that we will be doing will be in the most perfect way. One of the mitzvahs that it says openly that you need to have all of its inhabitants upon it is Yovel. The mitzvah of Yovel, of the Jubilee year, of the 50th year, is only once all of its inhabitants are upon it. So therefore, it didn't work by the second base of Migdash. And even in the first base of Migdash, where the last 100 to close to 200 years, there was the 2.5 Shvatim, Eivra Yardin was exiled. There was also no Yovel because there wasn't Kol Yeshua Allah. So the Rebbe is trying to examine and to extrapolate from this that the perfection of Eretz Yisrael that will be when Mashiach comes is dependent upon all of its inhabitants being. Then the Rebbe goes on to say, especially since speaking about these matters is dealing with the inner part of Torah. This idea, the inner part of Torah, is about spreading the well springs outward. This is this Maimer, the Torah on Parshas Achrei. There's also an explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek in his Sefer Ora Torah. And lately, in other words, by Tavshim Mem Ches, when this Maimer was said, was also printed a Maimer from the Mittler Rebbe that elaborates upon this topic. The Shayach Gam Lag Ba'omer, it's also connected to Lag Ba'omer. The idea of Lag Ba'omer is the revelation of the inner part of the Torah. Therefore, the joy on Lag Ba'omer is a revealed simcha. Like the Rebbe explains many times, this is the difference between two yard sites. The 7th of Adar was the yard site of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Lag Ba'omer is the yard site of the Rashbi. So he says the Zayin Adar Haimetzchila Inyan Hafkichul. Initially, the 7th of Adar was a thing that was the opposite of joy. But and only afterwards, because of what was revealed, that was Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday, and because of that, the entire month of Adar was transformed, so it became a month of joy, and the Zayin Ba'adar became joyous. Even initially, it says that Lag Ba'omer was a revealed joy. Even more so, the Lag Ba'omer b'sfiras Hoyt Shebahayt. So this brings down that since Lag Ba'omer is the sfira of Hoyt Shebahayt, B'Shavua Chamish is the sfiras Omer, it's the 5th week of Sfiras Omer. B'chinas Achi Tachten, Chassidus explains that the 5th week of Sfiras Omer, we have already gone through the majority of it, and therefore we're gotten through to the lowest levels. And therefore it connects with the most highest level. The lowest, as we always know, connects to the most highest level, even a level that's higher than being categorized as high. Joy that's beyond all measure and boundary. Through that we come to the true and complete redemption. The simchas olam al rosham, everlasting joy upon their heads.